All right, welcome everybody to our new series that we're going to be doing. It's going to be called the Executive and Leader Development Series with CMAX Advisors. My name is Noah Durst. I'm here with our founder, Brian Gillum. Today we're going to be talking about the top 3 considerations for your company vision. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right. So number 1, what we have is have a clear vision for your company. So when we look at this, Brian, I'll let you talk a little bit. I guess, what does a vision mean?
Well, usually for most organizations, a vision is the aspirational goals of where the organization will be in the future. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times an organization will say, in 20 years, these are the things that we're going to strive for. Mm-hmm. That's going to set us apart from our competition.
Definitely. Yeah, so is this just a lofty statement, or is it really an aspirational goal for the company?
Well, for many companies, it's a lofty statement. Mm-hmm. In my experience, leaders don't do a great job of taking their vision and then making sure that they are taking steps to attain that vision. Mm-hmm. And so what we help companies with is helping them understand, first of all, let's define what that vision is and making sure leaders understand it.
Yeah.
And then let's take steps so that you can reach that vision in the future.
Okay, awesome. So looking into that vision, how do these leaders know that they're truly making progress towards accomplishing, that overarching vision or goal? How do they know they're on the right steps for this?
When we start working with a company that has a vision in place, most times we find that they don't have milestones. Mm-hmm. or some things defined that help them know that they're making progress.
Okay.
And so what we do is we try to break down that vision to say, okay, if this is an aspirational goal for the future of your business, how do you know that you're taking steps to make progress on that?
Yeah.
So we'll help them create some milestone targets, help them describe what the business will look like in 5 years that will show that they're actually starting to make progress towards attaining that vision.
Okay. Speaking of obtaining that vision, how does a leader know when they get there, or when they're on the right track to get there?
And that's a great question. The question that we often use to understand that is asking the owner, what's the resting place of the business in the future? Thinking about, you have an aspirational goal. What's the business look like at that resting place when you've reached your vision? And it really makes them take a step back to understand, how do I define that? What's it going to look like? What are the characteristics that exist if we do reach that vision?
All right, so for number 2, for business leaders, they need to have a clear purpose for their organization. So Brian, explain a little bit about what this purpose could be, and how important is it to leaders and organizations?
For most small businesses, the vision of the organization is really derived from the purpose of the owner. So the owner typically has some sort of purpose that drives them internally, and then that comes through in terms of the vision of the organization. So what we find is there's a very strong correlation between an owner's vision and an owner's purpose and the vision of the organization.
Okay, so speaking of vision, there's a lot of cultural aspects in this. How would you say the values should impact that vision and that purpose?
What we find is that the values of, typically the values of the owner, personality traits of the owner, the motivators of the owner, has a significant impact on the culture of the business. And so what we do is we look at the owner or maybe owners and assess what are their motivators, what are the things that drive them, what are their personality characteristics, and then that helps the leaders look at the culture of the business and understand how do those personality traits then impact the culture.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, and we're here with number 3. So number 3, we have making sure your vision aligns with your strategy and your day-to-day operations. All right, so as we get into this, Brian, how do you know when a strategy is closely aligned to the day-to-day, priorities and operations of a business?
Well, so if we start with the vision and look at, is the strategy aligned to the vision, again, it starts with some of those milestones. Mm-hmm. So we might have milestones for 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What are some of the characteristics that a company will have that would indicate that they're on path to reach their vision. Then you take those milestones and break them down into a strategy. And so most businesses would have a strategic plan, and we would compare our milestones to that strategic plan to see, do they generally align or not? And then as we look at the strategic plan and the day-to-day activities, typically what we find is businesses do a very good job of saying, here's our strategic plan, and these are the day-to-day activities to meet that strategic plan. Some of the areas where we see a little bit of a disconnect is if the vision doesn't align with the strategic plan. So for example, we've worked with a company that has a vision to be very innovative. However, their strategic plan and their day-to-day activities are really aligned towards current financial success. So what we see is that while they might have a vision to be very innovative and be a best-in-class provider of the particular service that they're offering, what we're seeing is that their day-to-day activities are really more focused towards current financial performance and not as specific or doesn't really incorporate how are they spending their time and making decisions to make sure they reach that best-in-class status that they're seeking.
Definitely. So how, I guess, can a CEO or a leader of an organization make sure that the employees really understand this and kind of see how it translates to their day-to-day priorities and their day-to-day tasks?
Well, I think the first part is making sure that leaders and employees truly understand what that vision is. What we find is in a lot of companies, you'll have a vision statement and you might talk about it once a year and that's it. Or the leader might be thinking about it a lot and maybe discussing it, or the owner might be discussing it with other people, but they might not be having a lot of conversations, meetings, discussions, plans around how do we reach it. So what we would encourage a business to do is, starting with the owner and the leaders, come up with some steps, approaches, so that there's continual conversation around what the vision is, what we want it to be, where we want to be, and comparing some of those milestones to the strategic plan and making sure they're aligned.
Okay. All right, so bringing this home to our audience, say we have leaders watching here, they kind of notice, they don't know how clear their vision is for their company. They're not sure if the alignment of, their vision, falls and trickles down into their strategy, their priorities, their day-to-day operations. What are some effective ways that leaders can, interpret this and, put it into effect in their organization?
Well, we break down vision into three components. One is the final resting place of the business. What is the business if you have if you have an aspirational target in 20, 30, 40 years, what do you want to become? Trying to define what that looks like.
Yeah.
That's the first part. The second piece of the vision that we talk a lot about is the purpose of the owner.
Yeah.
What's their mission? What's their purpose? What drives them? And then understanding how does that align to the company's vision, and drawing some kind of comparisons and showing some alignment. Definitely. And then the third piece is the personality traits of the owners and understanding how that impacts culture. We take those three things together, and any leader can do it to say, based on these three things, this will help us really define our vision more clearly, so that we can talk about it with our leaders and talk about it with our employees to get everybody on the same page. And now it just becomes an approach of putting it down on paper and starting to execute some things on it.
Yeah, it almost becomes a way of life, I guess,
That's
for
right.
the organization.
That's right.
Okay, awesome. So you spoke a little bit about communicating that. So what are some effective avenues that CEOs, executives can really communicate that personality of the business down to the lower level employees? Because oftentimes, we will see a disconnect between executives and people working within operations and the day-to-day priorities. What are some effective ways that they can communicate that and make sure that the whole company really embodies what they're looking for?
Well, I'll start with the second around making sure that the employees embody it. Typically, it starts with accountability. And so we would recommend that an organization put some sort of, through the performance evaluation process, place some sort of priority around how is an individual contributing to the accomplishment of the vision. So that's a really good way of building in accountability into the organization to really focus more on vision. In terms of communication, what we find a lot of times is when vision is discussed, it's discussed by the owner or by the executive leaders, and it's presented as opposed to discussions with employees, frontline employees, individual contributors, supervisors and managers. So having them take a little bit more ownership and having a little bit more engagement around what that vision is and what are they doing to help this put the organization in a good place to reach it.
All right, so speaking, to our viewers, they may have had a very strong vision in place when, something unexpected like COVID-19 and other things hit. Does that change a company's vision? Are there ways that they can kind of alter that to fit the new, climate, whether it's, remote workforce or things along those lines?
That's a great question. Typically, a vision is going to transcend events like that. When you have an aspirational goal for your organization, an event like COVID might impact your business results, but it's probably not going to change your long-term destination and long-term placement of where you want the business to be. It might change course a little bit, or it might take it a little longer for us to get there than what we thought it would. But typically, when you think of your vision as kind of your lighthouse or your North Star, it doesn't. An event like COVID isn't going to make you change course. It might just change a little bit of the way you get there or how long it's going to take you to get there.
Definitely. All right. Well, that kind of wraps things up for you. Any lasting thoughts or comments that you'd like for our viewers to see?
I would just say that there's a lot of, we talk with leaders and people have a very good idea of creating a vision statement, but what we find in talking to business owners is when you break down what are the characteristics of vision, there's not as much clarity. And so I would challenge leaders to really dig down a little bit into vision. Instead of just coming up with a statement, think about what does it really mean for my business and how am I changing the way that I operate on a daily basis in order to reach this future aspirational place that we're trying to get to.
Awesome. Well, hey, we appreciate it. To wrap things up, I'm going to throw these three, considerations for your company vision right here below, and then please like, subscribe, share this. If this is something that made you think a little bit more about your company vision, think a little bit more about the strategy for your day-to-day priorities. We'd love to hear your comments. Any ideas that you guys may have. So also feel free to check us out online at cmaxadvisors.com, LinkedIn at CMAX Advisors, and we will see you guys next week. Thank you.
Thank you.